Hello, friends. Do you have a moment so that we may discuss our Lord and Savior Minarchy? No, seriously, I'm just kidding. Hi, my name's Rick Robinson. I am the general manager of KLRNradio.com. We are probably the largest independent podcast network that you've never heard of. We have a little bit of everything, and by that, what I mean to tell you is we have news, pop culture, special events, conspiratainment, true crime, mental health shows, drama productions, and pretty much everything in between. So if you're looking for a new podcast home to grab a little bit of everything that you love all in one place, come check us out. You can find us on X under @KLRNradio. You can find us on our Rumble and our YouTube channels under the same names. You can also find us at KLRNradio.com and pretty much every podcast catcher known to man. So again, feel free to come check us out anytime you like at KLRNradio.
Testing. Is this thing on? Are we live? What's happening? Oh my God, I've gone deaf. Not hearing anything. Testing. Am I muted? Let me see. No, I'm not muted. We've lost Rick. There's Rick.
It was me. I was muted somehow. I don't even know what happened there.
Rick!
Anyway.
No. We lost our normal opening with the jazzy music and everything.
Well, actually, because I'm going to cut it, so we're just going to do it from here, so it'll make it easier for me. So we'll just pretend this didn't happen yet. The live folks get to hear this, but the podcast.
Good evening, everyone.
So, yeah, I'll fix it later. So here he is, ladies and gentlemen, the man, the myth, the legend, Corin. Take two.
Excellent work, Rick. Fantastic. Well, what's happening, everybody? I see that the message boards are lighting up. All kinds of excitement and enthusiasm out there. Artist Shoe, what's happening, my brother? Vincent Charles, Alan Ray, Cicely down there. All the good folks. Wonderful. We're coming through loud and clear. It's excellent news. It's great news. And very excited for this evening. Very excited to dive back into this book. I've been thinking quite a bit. When I have time to think, I've been thinking quite a bit about what we read last week, where we left off as well, because I love that. What's up, Babbage? I love that one saying that was that I'll just repeat real quick. It's on page 156. Again, we're still digging into the philosophy of fire. Which is a fantastic book. It's Reverend R. Swinburne Clymer, MD, who is also a Rosicrucian and philosopher, and very interesting. But he just wrote here: a personal absolute exists not except in potency. God does not think, but is the cause of thought. and I just love that. I love that idea of of a causal, uh, a causal force behind all that makes up the metaphysical universe, where really we exist for the most part our entire lives. There's, in my humble opinion, you know, the majority, if not all, of our actual experience in life is taking place in our minds, not necessarily in physical reality. Because if we don't have our minds in order to make sense out of what our physical bodies are going through, then there is no experience whatsoever. So really, the interpretation of everything that we're experiencing in physical reality essentially is all happening, inside these crazy places. And there's the link to Philosophy of Fire if anybody wants to get it. I highly, highly recommend this book. And I also highly recommend Creating a Character for the Stage of Life, written by yours truly. There's, interesting enough, there's quite a bit in here that we've been discussing over these past weeks. Maybe we'll do my book one day. But going on to page 157, where we left off, it says, "In the hearts of men, there has always been a concept of what Christ or the perfect man should be. The justice of God towards every human creature implies a like justice between man and man. This principle of justice is a universal law and is equally meted out to all. And if the perfectibility of man's nature through evolution is to be accomplished, reincarnation is the only means." And I find that, yeah, I find that statement to be simple and profound. That if the perfectibility of man's nature through evolution is to be accomplished, reincarnation is the only means. Because how could it be possible, especially in this crazy world we live in today, for any one person in a single lifetime to be able to achieve some type of perfected state? I mean, I'm sure it's possible, but literally your every waking, breathing moment of life would have to be 1000% focused on only that accomplishment. There could be no other labors really involved, no other experiences involved. That's why in Buddhism, they say that it takes upwards of 60 lifetimes for someone to achieve the state of Bodhi, and which is what the Gautama Buddha had achieved in his lifetime. But he had said that also went back to his previous lifetimes before he was self-realized, 600 some odd years before Christ. And his philosophy, his teachings, uh, it's his philosophy and his teachings civilized over half of the known population of the planet at that time. Even though Buddhism decreased in its popularity and in its numbers over many last several thousands of years. But from his time, 600 some odd years before Christ, up until the Christian era, it was incredible what Buddhism accomplished. I mean, Buddhism was all the way down into Persia, and you see that in Afghanistan and other areas like that, there's these massive statues of the Buddha that were carved into the mountainsides. Catalonia, greetings. That's awesome. And that just goes to show the the popularity of Buddhist teachings and Buddha's life, that even in those regions, getting closer and closer to the Middle East, you had these iconic statues that were carved, which must have been very difficult back then to accomplish. The size they were. I mean, they make the size of those statues make Mount Rushmore look like 4 golf balls sitting on a hillside. But yeah, man, I'll just go on. We'll get into some back and forth with Rick here in a second. So it goes on down here. Again, I'm only reading stuff that I underline, that I outline. I'm not reading the whole book. But I find some of what he's saying in here quite Buddhistic. That's why I wanted to segue there. But it says here, carried out to its logic, this implies St. John's vision of heaven on earth will come about as a result of 2 actions. A, the self-destruction and elimination of themselves by vast numbers through the evils which biblically stated, the soul that sinneth, it shall die. And B, those who accept the divine law will so live as to transmute the personality into an individuality and become in truth the sons of God. Thus, by the elimination of the vicious and the divinification of the just and righteous, heaven will be made manifest on earth. The doctrine of pre-existence taught in all the mysteries applied to every child of woman born. The conditions of each life are determined by the lives previously lived. Thus, the fatherhood of God and the personification of divinity in humanity includes the universal and unqualified justice which men will sooner or later receive by the activity of the divine law, will be able to escape. There's such an absolute and irrevocable law. The true initiates of all ages, knowing this as a result of their experiences in the mysteries of initiation, those of autocrats, oligarchs, potentates, and oppression in any form and from any source, whether this be ecclesiastical or political. Neophytes are taught to obey the laws of the country in which they live. If such laws are clearly unjust, then they are at perfect liberty, and it becomes their duty to work for their replacement by just laws. Initiates are not agents of revolution, but of evolution. Persuasion, they may strive to reform a nation or a church, but they do not attempt to overthrow either. Last week, I was looking for a comment that I wrote on one of the pages, and I realized that it wasn't in past pages, it was in the forward ones, but I wrote here, materialistic humanitarians materialistic humanitarians are only concerned with the physical gains associated with being a so-called accomplished person instead of a self-realized individual. And I kind of got that from some of what I was reading in here. And the idea of that is that we spend so much time and energy trying to become an accomplished person. What is what does it say? Are we the VP? Are we the president? Are we the CEO? Are we the COO? What are we? What have we achieved in life? What kind of cars do we have? What kind of materialistic gains have we made for ourselves that we can then show people in our driveways, and the size of and what we have, what kind of TV do we have, how nice is our cutlery, all of these things, instead of focusing on being a self-realized individual, which denotes an anti-materialistic point of view, meaning that yes, having the comforts of this life can afford us the ability to become realized, but only being focused on comforts of this life doesn't help that. So, again, there's always this balance. I wrote in here, an individual is like an indivisible duality, individual. So it's a duality that is there that makes a singularity, but it has to be balanced, right? And that's what I'm digging on. You dig me, Rick? Did I lose you?
Oh, no. No. No, I'm still here. I just usually when you're talking by yourself, I try to give you the full stage, so I'm not just sitting here and everybody's going, "What's he doing over there looking off on the screen?" No, I mean, there's so much to unpack with this part of it because, and Shu just brought up an interesting point in the chat. What if life is a loop reincarnating you back to your own childhood, and that's why you have deja vu? Um, the interesting thing, there's a quantum mechanic theory now that that they believe that sometimes what might be happening, and this is in the realm of kind of out there quantum theory, but you know how occasionally people will tell you, like the whole thing with the Mandela effect and all the things where people sometimes remember things differently than other people. It's because at some point the life in the universe they were in ended, and they've jumped to a new one to continue the journey. And so I've been researching that quite a bit because that's right up juxtaposition's alley. So the fact that they're starting to talk about that even in the realm of even a distant possibility in quantum physics is kind of astounding.
Yeah, 100%. I've also, in as far as deja vu is concerned, some of my light research into what that phenomenon potentially is. That when we're speaking of these kind of like these quantum loops or these cycles of life, or like when we've been discussing the Akashic record, which is a storage house of all potentialities, meaning meaning that our destiny, our time track that we're living on, there's so many different places that we could end up being based on what our daily choices are on our path to wherever it is that we're trying to get to. And one of the interesting theories there is that the deja vu is that moment when the tuning in becomes perfect, that you're actually right where you're supposed to be along the time track, and that jarring kind of outer body experience of the moment, like, wow, I've been here before. What is this? I feel like I know this moment. This experience is that you're right where you're exactly supposed to be because of all of the different potentials, and you've realized a moment
It,
of
it,
that
it
in
it's
present
funny.
time.
It's funny that you mentioned that because that happens to me all the time, and it even used to happen to me when I was a kid when I could barely understand that it was happening. It was just these weird moments of it feels like I've lived this exact moment before. As a matter of fact, it just happened to me a few days ago. I was in the middle of a conversation with somebody, and I'm like, dude, we have had this conversation before. Of course, I didn't say it to them because everybody looks at me like I've grown an extra head when I say it. But the funny thing is, I've noticed throughout my life that it always seems like it's kind of a signpost, and it's kind of letting me know, hey, this is exactly where you're supposed to be. Because I've noticed things that have happened afterwards and I'm like, oh, this was, and it's just something. It's weird that you put it that way because that's exactly how I felt about it for a long time. But unpacking some of what you said a moment ago about this whole quest for materialism, I really wish we could get away from that because with all of the things that we could be doing with our time, keeping up with the Joneses is the least interesting one to
Mm,
me. Because
totally.
there's so many things that we could make better. I mean, speaking of, not trying to pat my own back or anything, but speaking of the network that I've built, there are other people that are doing this very same thing, and they charge everybody anywhere from $100 per month per hour and more
Wow.
to do what I do. And I'm like, dude, that's not what this is about. This is about putting messages out. If I can find a way to make it make money on its own without having to say, oh, you're going to pay me for my time, then it'll make money. But that's not what I'm doing it for. I'm doing it because I want to be able to put information out into the universe and see what kind of return it gets. And it's kind of that same thing. Everybody's like, you could be making bank doing this, right? It's like, yeah, but why? Because then more and more people would be like, I'm not paying that. I mean, that's why you see all these networks that are paying that much. They usually wind up with 5 or 6 people that are willing to pay them that kind of money over and over and over again. I would rather
Yeah,
be able to put as much out there as possible and let it try to make it on its own.
I love that, and I think that you will make it, and I think that it will become successful as time goes on, and as you put more and more time and energy into this. The universe has to reciprocate at some point. Although in this oh so materialistic um, world that we live in today, sometimes there's a delay on that. Unfortunately,
No,
it's interesting when you see the success of some individuals who are just the smarmiest, most abrasive, uh, most dislikable individuals you could ever imagine. but have accomplished so much in this in a physical sense, in this world. And then it makes me think, well, that's because that's what their makeup is. They're totally and completely enthralled and immersed in making things happen for themselves, to enrich themselves and empower themselves, and that being their primary focus. Of course, they're able to accomplish it, but it doesn't mean that they're wonderful people.
I mean, in some ways, the universe is already paying me dividends. I mean, heck, I do a podcast every week now with Parker Lewis, so I think I'm winning.
Yeah. Casperius is like, first time I have been on these streams. What have I missed? Please give me a full recap of parts 1 through 9. Yeah, I'm glad you put a little tongue out there. That's a hell of a recap, my friend. Jumping on to page 159, it says, the thinnest veil over the sublime mystery of the ineffable name is brotherhood and love. The gross darkness that hangs like a black veil over the Shekinah is selfishness and hate. The Shekinah is the indwelling spirit. Beneath all of these, there sleeps or wakes a demon or an angel, and one of these is ever in chains, for no man can serve two masters. Never in the history of the world, not even when directly under pagan rule, has such selfishness been manifested by such a diversity of men of all classes as during these days of the changing world and the onset of the new age. Profoundly manifested to the student of history that the age beginning with Constantine and his council at Nice has been a degrading failure. The religious concept of the secret schools is vastly different. It is in harmony. Faith and absolute law are at the foundation. So-called miracles are conceived as resting upon law and justice, reason or cause and effect, because God cannot be either unjust or illogical or act without reason, that a miracle be performed. Science, as conceived by the secret schools, must be found on logic, law, and reason, and spirit as the life of the material with which science deals. If one examines the symbols, questions the mysteries, and searches out the root idea of the founders and of the prophets, harmony will be found throughout. Along diverse and often winding paths, one will always reach the same point, so that penetration into the arcanum of one of these religious means entrance into the secrets of the rest. Then a strange phenomenon results. By degrees in an ever-widening circle, the doctrine of the initiates is seen to shine forth in the fundamentals of these religions, like a sun clearing away its nebula. Each religion appears as a different planet. With each, we change both atmosphere and celestial orientation. Still, it is always the same sun which illumines us. That soul which was burned out that soul which was burned out of her through her practice of well, that's getting into a whole other thing. Let's see. I'll just go ahead and read it. It just says, that soul which was burned out of her through her practice of homosexuality, taught and practiced by the priestess of hell, the poetess Sappho, a cult rapidly undermining Western civilization. So it says here, enchanting Greece sweeps us along to the magic feasts of life and gives to her mysteries the seduction of her form, charming or terrible in turn, and of her ever passionate soul. They're talking about Sappho. But what's interesting about that is one thing. It's not in this particular book. It's in another book. I think it might have been written by the same gentleman. The Secrets of Sex and Race Regeneration, I believe, is what it is. And he just touches on the idea that that sex for any other means other than the procreation of the race is, you get into a gray area of ethics and morals and all of that, and that's left up to the individual. I'm neither here nor there on that in present time, but sex addiction and things like that obviously can take people down dark paths. I mean, that's just anybody can be aware of that. So but it goes on here to say, the doctrine taught by Orpheus, God is one and eternally unchangeable. He reigns over all. The gods are diverse and innumerable, for divinity is eternal and infinite. The greatest gods are the souls of the constellation. Half conscious, inaccessible, and unchangeable, they govern the mighty whole by their unvarying movements. Each revolving constellation draws along in its ethereal sphere phalanxes of demigods or radiant souls, who which formerly human and who, after descending the scale of kingdoms, have gloriously ascended the cycles and finally issued from the ground of generation. It is through these divine spirits that God breathes, acts, and manifests himself, or rather, these form the breath of his eternal being, the rays of his eternal consciousness. I know that's a big mouthful there. What I got, not just from this, but some other books, especially on Egyptian metaphysics, is that the pantheon of gods were not. It wasn't that there was all these different separate gods that that were worshipped as individualities, but that they were they were a diverse array of the source. So you could say that there's one all permeating God, that you have these the zodiac, the 12 houses and all that, and that many of these gods that came in ancient times were representative of one of these houses, but that all of the houses were a single a single thing, and that as it manifested into all of its parts, some people would get focused on the individual permutations of it. So all the gods of Egypt were basically the complexity of the human psyche, and each of the different gods represented a different aspect of ourselves. That once we could, almost like a psychology, and then once we could understand each one of these individually and what they represented, we could put the whole together, and then we could apply it to ourselves, which is similar to I mentioned it in another time we did one of these, the story of Horus and Set and Osiris and Isis, and how that was an analogy of the resurrecting of the spirit within and the overcoming of the lower nature, and letting the lower nature be banished to the underworld, which is represented by Set, and that Horus is the living soul that is brought to life once you become self-realized, and that Osiris and Isis are the dual nature of our psychological makeup, the negative and the positive, so to speak. Does that track, Rick?
Oh yeah, completely. Yeah.
Good.
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 I'm still trying to push the feeds out and stuff, so I'm only happy.
Yeah. Do your thing. I'm going to carry on. It's page 163 here. I struggled to find them, braved death, and it is said descended into hell to tame the demons of the abyss, to summon the gods from on high, that lofty heaven might unite with earth, listening with delight to strains divine. Celestial beauty will become incarnate in the flesh of woman. The fire of Zeus will run in the blood of heroes, and long before mounting to the constellations, the sons of the gods will shine forth light immortal. Krishna taught the doctrine of the immortal soul, its rebirth and mystical union, not absorption in God. The body envelops the soul, which makes therein its dwelling and is a finished thing. But the indwelling soul is invisible, imponderable, incorruptible, and eternal. Earthly man is threefold: intelligence, soul, and body. If the soul is united with the intelligence, it attains sattva, wisdom and peace. If it remains uncertain between the intelligence and the body, it is dominated by rajas, passion, and turns from object to object in a fatal cycle. If it abandons itself to the body, it falls into tamas, want of reason, ignorance, and temporary death. That's a lot of what we were just talking about, is that you have this ability to be attracted by a more spiritualized way of experiencing life, or attracted to a more physical experience of life. And that's that middle ground where we're trapped, being pulled back and forth between the two of them, and how to and how we um what decisions we make on a daily basis of what are we going to pursue in life. Certainly we have to provide for our families, we have to provide for ourselves, we have to have a roof over our head, we have to pay our bills, we have to do all of these things that are set forth in the way that that our reality has been structured for us. And it's a completely false reality in my opinion. It's just, this is the way that it's been created for us. It's like a trap, a soul trap, where we're put into this, this life of like taxes, death and taxes. It's like the only thing you can count on,
The only two certainties in life, death and taxes. But
Yeah.
so, well, the idea of reincarnation brings up another interesting point, and it's something that, since we've been reading this book together, or trying to, because I've noticed sometimes your page numbers and mine don't match, because I have the digital version, so I'm like,
Oh, interesting.
that's not what mine says, but I can eventually figure out where you are, because I have a good enough memory to hold it there long enough until I find the right page. And some of it's because you're reading from your notes, not the actual book too. But one of the things that I find interesting, because one of the theories that you and I have batted back and forth pretty much since you've started doing the show and you asked me to take a more prominent role, is the idea that we are basically the eyes and ears and hands and feet of the universe as it learns everything about what it's created. And the interesting thing about the idea of reincarnation is, if that's really what we are, is the universe ever really going to get tired enough of learning that it doesn't keep sending us out to find more?
Yeah, I would say that as infinite as the universe appears to be, is as infinite as the possibilities are for self-realization. I think that you know like is has been suggested in a number of religions, that once you become an absolutely self-realized being, and you're now vibrating on this higher frequency, you are then born into a whole other type of reality, that may have some type of physical properties, but in such a way that we cannot possibly comprehend them. So it's another dimensional phase of existence that would have, different separations in individuals, but there would be more of a unification of those individuals in terms of their understanding of one another. And that's
Well, kind of like interconnecting to the point where, the stuff that we're talking about kind of in the periphery right now, like things like the Akashic field, I would assume probably in whatever the higher planes of existence are, those things are more and more tangible. So while we would still be separate entities, we are more interconnected than we are down here. That's my
yes.
theory anyway.
Yeah, totally, man. 100%. So it goes on to say, it says, the devout man, surprised by death, after enjoying for some time the due reward of his virtues, his in superior realms of peace, finally returns again to inhabit a body in some holy and respectable family. But this kind of regeneration in this life is very difficult to attain. The man thus born again finds himself possessed of the same degree of application and advancements as regards the intellect and spiritual attainment as he had in his previous body, and he begins to work fresh perfection through service and devotion. The mighty and profound secret, the sublime and sovereign mystery is this: that to attain to perfection, one must acquire the knowledge of unity, which is above wisdom. One must rise to the divine being who is above the personal soul, above the intelligence. This divine being, this sublime friend, is in each one of us. God dwells within each man, though few can find him. This is the path to salvation. Once thou hast perceived the perfect being who is above the world and within thyself, do thou decide to abandon the enemy which takes the form of desire. Control thy passions. The joys afforded by the senses are like wombs of future suffering. Not only do good, but be good. Let the motive be in the action, not in its fruits. Abandon the fruits of thy works, but let each action be as an offering to the Supreme Being. The man who sacrifices his desire and works to the being whence proceed the beginnings of all things, and by whom the universe has been formed, attains to perfection by this sacrifice. For he who within himself finds this happiness, his joy, his peace, and light is one with God. Know then that the soul which has found God is freed from rebirth and death, old age and grief. Such a soul drinks the water of immortality. We were just kind of talking about that idea that at some point when you've accomplished that type of spiritual advancement, that you don't necessarily have to be born back into this physical world again, because this is a an in between. This is a stage of like a classroom, where the choices to either do good or do evil are very apparent. We all have the ability every day to decide, well, I'm going to go out today and I'm going to rampage on the world and I'm going to make everybody around me totally miserable. And that could be your objective for the day. Or it could be the opposite of that. Like, hey man, I'm going to go out there today and I'm going to try and uplift people and make people feel better, and because it makes me feel better. So that's the world that we're in. We're in this in between.
Yeah, well, I mean, going back to the whole concept of reincarnation and everything else, I also firmly believe, and this is something that I've had to come to terms with. I think a lot of what we go through in our life is on purpose, because I think in some ways we decide before we ever get here the lessons that we still haven't learned, and we put ourselves in positions to be able to learn them. Then it's up to
Yeah,
us whether we do or we do not.
totally.
And realizing that some of the mess you have put yourself in is both designed by the choices you make here, and the path you chose before you got here can change the entire way that you look at all of them, because it starts giving you more control when you realize all of this has been up to you the entire time.
Yeah, man, I completely agree with that. I totally agree with that. I think that if you do believe in reincarnation, which to me is logical, I'm not saying that you know that it's necessarily provable, because even in the techniques that are available to be able to recall past lives, this could still be somewhat of an imaginary experience, uh, and
Well,
may not necessarily be able to be proven to be actual fact, although it's
well,
what I personally believe. you
Well,
know
again, even as a Christian, I find it hard not to believe in that, because there is a point in the Bible, in the New Testament, when Jesus plainly asks, "Who do people say that I am?" And they start
right,
naming off dead people. Why would
right,
they name off dead people if they didn't believe in reincarnation? They weren't calling him a zombie, they weren't running from him. So obviously, there's a reason why they were naming off those people that weren't on our plane of existence anymore, as far as we know. So again, that's just one of the things that, even being a Christian, that verse sticks in my head all the time. Is like, who do people say that I am? And they start naming off people that had been dead years before. So that
totally.
means even they believed in it to a point. So, and we've talked about it during this particular book. Even if you do believe in reincarnation, I think in some instances maybe the universe has gotten tired of how long it takes for some of us to learn the lesson, so it gave us a cheat code.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I dig that, dude. I totally dig that. I'm going to see if I can burn through a chunk of this chapter here, because once this chapter ends, up ahead, it gets into Atlantis and then ancient Egypt and other things that are a little bit more of like kind of a historical narrative. And I think that I can finally end off on this book before we get into those more kind of historical narratives. So let me see what I can do here, if we can possibly get through the rest of this. The man reaching perfection is a Christ, and Christ is united to God. This is the birthright of every human soul. All real initiation is an internal, not an external or formal process. The outer ceremony is useful only insofar as it symbolizes and illustrates, and thereby makes clear the inward change taking place. To be truly initiated is to be transformed, and this indicates a regeneration and can result only by trial, effort, by self-conquest as a result of disappointment, failures, and daily renewal of the inner conflict. It is thus that man must work out his own salvation. The consummation of initiation is mastership to the degree the neophyte has been able to transmute the carnal within his nature and has been able to bring the Christos into consciousness. This is the goal, the perfect consummation of human evolution through conscious development. By constant struggle and daily conflict with the problems of life, the initiate has conquered self. Through life after life, he has gained experience, which is wisdom. At every step, he has learned to love more and know deeper feeling. The man who is without fear and without it's a hard word to pronounce, concupiscence, which is lust. The man who is without fear and without concupiscence, who has courage to be absolutely poor and yet just and kind, who is ready and anxious to obey and live the life, who is fortunate or unfortunate, satisfied to his home or live in one owned by another, whether he is a humble worker or honored by his fellow men, ready to defend the poor or unfortunate against injustice when in his power to do so, and who is envious of none. Such a one is ready for the path and may become an inheritor of the mystic kingdom of heaven, wherein all things will ultimately be added to his lot. Possessions are neither an evil nor a hindrance, but it is necessary to hold the mental spiritual attitude that all material things are merely for passing use in the climb to the divine. There is nothing so difficult as to attain to the state of equilibrium. It is well to desire and seek, but not to be envious, to love and feel, but not to hate, to possess, but not to hoard, to enjoy, but not abuse, to be affectionate, but not jealous, to possess power and influence, but not use these for selfish purposes. The senses must be controlled, especially sight and touch, and living entities should be made of all the elements of the body. Then within the self will be found the power to attain. When the neophyte has gained control over the senses of the body the process of the ordeal is accomplished. The neophyte is under his vow. The initiate and hierarch is free. So when the neophyte has gained control over the senses of the body, the process of the ordeal is accomplished. It's as simple as that. That once you're no longer the effect of everything that you're feeling, and you become the absolute cause. Then at that point, there's a great spiritual accomplishment that's taken place. So through natural evolution, man is continually climbing upward. Evolution, fortified by conscious development, helps him to reach the goal centuries or eons before natural evolution would accomplish this. Meaning that if we apply ourselves on a regular basis to this primary goal, being spiritually advanced or awakened, then we can quicken the time it takes to achieve this, which through many lifetimes, if you're not practicing this, then it could take forever, right? So through development, man's five senses are adjusted to observations and experiences on the physical plane, and he gains by spiritual experiences. There is revealed to him a whole world of action in which the lower senses play no part, a world of aspiration in which the selfish self is not the goal. The very physical bounds of this self are loosening, expanding, and disappearing. Hitherto, he has been conscious of flashes of intuition, of knowing things he has seemingly never learned. He feels inner meanings and senses subtler powers in visions and intuitions of the day, the experiences beyond the bounds of senses. He becomes conscious of power of concentrated thought. By conquering self, his will becomes strong. By subduing passion, his mind becomes creatively powerful. He has premonitions of coming events. All events and thoughts exist first on the subjective plane and are precipitated thence into matter. He has broken the bonds of self and begins to function on higher planes of being, thus coming into harmonious touch with the divine. Just real quick there, it says, he has premonitions of coming events. All events and thoughts exist first on the subjective plane and are precipitated thence into matter, meaning that all of our actions we can be totally and completely conscious of all of our actions and all of our behaviors. I'm not saying that I am at all, okay, but we can be, and this would take away the reactive nature of our tendencies to just react to whatever is coming at us in potentially a very negative way, and cause more harm than good, right? So the idea is not to despise the body, but to purify and refine it, not to destroy the appetites, but to elevate and control them. This mastery of the lower nature does not change the physical nature as such, but subordinates it to that of the higher level. The first step to be made in initiation is for the neophyte to bring his thoughts into control. Instead of passively and helplessly accepting all incentives that come from the physical desires or such as result from selfishness, pride, and other unworthy aspects of the selfish will, he must change and exalt the desires by an effort of the will, and then the thoughts will be on a higher level. In this manner, he will acquire mastery over his own mental processes and free his will from the dominion of desires which would normally lead him downward rather than onward and upward. The mysteries unfolded to the neophytes, the evolution of worlds, the religion of nature, the possibility of the immortality of the soul, and the natural evolution of humanity. It goes on here. The ideal in the church and the state, the motive of the ecclesiastical and political hierarchies, has undoubtedly in all ages aspired to govern man proposedly for this good. The secret schools have always had in view the ideal that man should learn and gain the power to govern himself first, then to work in harmony with all others of like attainment for the establishment of an ideal republic based on justice and equal opportunity for all, without restrictions of any nature other than fair dealing between man and non-imposition of one man upon another. When, however, those in power claim authority as an inheritance rather than by service to man, suppress knowledge, and punish those who refuse to accept unjust dictation, interfere with free will and free choice, and in some manner torture body and agonize the mind on the devil's plea of the saving the soul, they become the enemies of God and say to man. Meaning, like, there's those practices, where people like whip themselves with like a cat of nine tails, like punishing themselves, torturing themselves in a physical sense, like the fakirs of India and stuff, like, they'll like tie their arm to their head until their arm dies and withers away to prove that the body means nothing to them. You know what I'm saying? Like, people can go to extremes to prove something that you don't need to do that to prove.
Yeah, remember, folks, balance is good. Don't go to the extreme. Because could you imagine doing that to yourself just to try to prove a point?
Oh, dude. I mean, it wouldn't, it's a lot of people do crazier things to prove less important points.
Yeah, I guess you're right there.
We're doing pretty good, man. We're burning through it. I might be able to knock this out before we go. Before we hit our hour. So it says here on page 172, souls as such are sexless. The sex of the body is the result of selection by the incarnating soul. No civilization that has ever existed has risen to any great heights or long maintained its supremacy if it debased woman or women debased themselves. The secret doctrine taught with unmistakable clearness that sexual debasement in any form and long continued is the highway to degeneracy and the destruction of both man and woman, of nations quite as certainly as of individuals, destructive of both body and the soul of man. The old gods were symbolic or personal attributes of various phases of nature through which man was taught to realize the existence of a supreme being and an ever operating law. Let me reread that. The old gods were symbolical or personal attributes of various phases of nature through which man was taught to realize the existence of a supreme being and an ever operating law. This was not polytheism nor idolatry, but a system of instruction not easily defined, yet pointing to that which must forever remain unknown and unknowable, except by the aid of symbols, parables, allegories, and, to the advanced, by sensing, feeling, and experience. We seek no man, men seek us, to know, to dare, to act, and to keep silent. Originally, there was but one exposition of the secret doctrine, but as this spread in other lands and other times, there was a division, each race giving its own method of expression in its own peculiar symbolism. This religious system was both scientific and philosophical, and its inculcations were as laws governing every action of life, both natural and spiritual. In time, as men became selfish, the mysteries were debased and subjugated to the will of those not in harmony with them. And it was only through the efforts of the initiates who sacredly kept their vows that they were saved for mankind. The conquest of Egypt by the Cambyses completed the ruins in the land of the pharaohs, and Pythagoras became the link between the old philosophical system and the Christian mysteries under the Gnostics. The Christian mysteries were derived from the Essenes and the schools of Alexandria, then in their glory. It may be said with truth that the Christian mysteries were the offspring of the ancient mysteries and secret doctrines, so arranged as to meet the ideas, customs, and needs of the time in which they flourished. During the first few years after the time of the Nazarene, these doctrines, under the faithful supervision of the Gnostics, flourished openly, but were finally forced to be concealed as a result of the activities of Constantine, who established Orthodox Christianity and destroyed, so far as was in his power, all that belonged to or adhered to the old regime under which the Nazarene had been taught and trained, and for which he lived, labored, and suffered. The spirit of the religion taught by the Nazarene was that of the ancient mysteries and wisdom religion, so simplified that all might readily understand and apply the inculcations in normal life and daily activities. The ethical teachings of the Nazarene were more pronounced than in ancient mysteries, and this was necessary among a people who were openly termed a generation of vipers. He who openly claims to be either initiate, adept, or master is never what he claims to be, but a fraud pretending to be other than what he is. The charlatan is usually loaded with honors and rolling in wealth as a reward for his deceit and misrepresentations of fraud and self-advertising, all of which he is shrewd enough to conceal from the masses, but which quickly becomes apparent to the initiate. Man betrays his character in every lineament of his face, the pose of his body and in his walk, his hands, the tone of his voice, and especially the expression of his eyes. No man possesses character. Character is that which he is, and not something apart from himself, which may be taken on or off at will or as circumstances dictate. And then, all right, we're on the last 2 pages. Although history may be found, all through history may be found those who were in possession of the true light, initiates of the flame, who concealed from vulgar notice and foolish praise both their knowledge of the hidden mysteries and their own identity as initiates. One thing is certain: it is their duty and pleasure to bring knowledge and give guidance to humanity when most needed, and they have helped and still help to shape the destiny of nations. So that's the end of the main the main chunk of the philosophy of fire. The following sections on Atlantis and ancient Egypt and ancient Persia, and it goes into the Essenes and all that. Those are a little bit more historical. Which I highly recommend you get this book and check it out. You can get into those tasty sections that we're not going to address because we're going to go on to the Akashic record next week.
You should save the Atlantis portion for when you come on mine and Ordy's Conspiratainment show.
Deal. I have another really, really great book on Atlantis that not many people are aware of. It's a fantastic book. But in this last section here, again, it's just why I love this book so much is because he absolutely just hammers home this whole entire point of differentiating ourselves from what is just a reactive kind of emotionally driven physical desire, sensationalism, that from that, and then a much more pure spiritual pathway that can guide us through this morass of physical wants and desires and everything, and give us the ability to find a really welcome balance between our thoughts, our desires, our actions, and just beingness, which is in Buddhism, the beingness is nothing, nowhere, no time, no one, and that's the state. That's the state or the condition of the being when it's just in a vibratory state where it's just vibing, you know what I mean? And we want to
Yeah.
change our vibe. We want to get into a really good vibe with not only ourselves, but with the universe around us. At least that's, kind of what I dig.
Well, the funny thing about this is, and this comes up all over the place because it was even brought up in the sermon at the church I go to, or in the church I go to today. One of the first ways to change your mindset is to get out of the entire Western concept of time, because the westernized concept of time is you have to be constantly doing something. You cannot stop. You never can stop. And even throughout the Bible, everybody that's ever had any type of, feeling where they felt like they were finally able to hear the voice of God, it's usually when they have finally just stopped. Whether and most of the time it happens when they're sleeping. They'll be woken up out of sleep and realize that, something or someone is trying to communicate with them. So if you really want to start trying to change your vibe or your mindset, or as we talk about all the time on this podcast, your frequency, one of the first things you got to do is learn to slow down, because you cannot constantly be going, going, going and focusing only on the physical and your daily needs and everything else, and be able to tap into anything else. And sometimes I think some of how this life has been, governed for us is designed to keep us from being able to do those things. From
Yeah,
some of the
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think that it's still my personal belief that in those kind of Atlantean times, that and whatever that worldwide civilization that existed before the fall, the megalithic age, as it were, that there was a time when the the spiritual vibe was the main vibe. I mean, this is a theory that was
yeah,
the main vibe, and that powerful individuals within that didn't like that game anymore because they weren't able to do the things or behave the way that they desired to, and so brought about the fall of that ancient civilization, which would be the deluge, the
yeah,
great catastrophe that occurred that ended that civilization, which has been timed out to be some 13 to 15,000 years ago or so, and that now we're back into an evolutionary state where we're trying to find that place again, hopefully. But the powers that destroyed that old civilization are trying to generate and create a new age that is really all about the physical experiences and the devolution of the human race, and more of a worldwide satanic cult, as it were.
yeah. Well, the scariest thing is if you look, it almost fits that we're kind of devolving to a point, because I mean, I look at our education system over 150 years ago and the things that they were learning in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade versus the things that they're learning in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade today, and I'm like, shouldn't we be ahead of where we were back then, not well behind? But what do I know?
Dude, 100%. I mean, also, when you go back and you look at history, and you find out the age of some of the great people that accomplished so much in their lives. I mean, as I believe, like Alexander the Great had already like conquered most of the world by the time he was like 18, 19 years old or something like that. Uh,
Right?
King Tut was 18, 19 years old when he was the ruler of ancient Egypt, and there was more of this, that the youth, they, even though there was a very strict kind of class system, that you can really see in India now, with the untouchable class, and then the
Yeah.
classes going up to the Rajas, but that but you learned the trade that you were born into, and so by the time you were able to even hold a hammer and a chisel, if your father was a mason, a stonemason, then you were learning how to become a stonemason. If your father was a carpenter, then you were learning how to be a carpenter. If your mother was a seamstress, then you were learning how to be a seamstress. If she was a gardener, then you were learning how to be a gardener. And by the time you were 12, 13 years old, you're full blown working. Your life has begun. So that's where we're going to end it. Is that boy, we are far behind the curve here, and we have a great life ahead of us. All of us do, and a great opportunity to experience every day anew, and to bring something to the world that doesn't exist, that's positive and beautiful. Right, Rick?
Exactly. I mean, like I said, that's part of why I do what I do. Why don't you remind folks where they can find you?
Hey man, first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. I love all the comments and everything. Sorry I didn't get to a lot of them. I get so caught up in these goodies. But you can find me at the letter I, the letter M, and my name, Corin Nimick. I'm Corin Nimick across almost all of the platforms, except on YouTube. It's Corin Nimick TV.
Gotta throw the TV in there on YouTube. Don't blame me though. I probably would too if I were you. All right, folks, hang out for In the Crease up next, followed by Sunday Night with Alan Ray right here live on KLRM Radio. We'll be with you next week, and I'll be back with you tomorrow night, so stay tuned.